Well, this has been a remarkable experience, this service here today for Liz and I. Every piece of it is something we are going to cherish and bring out from time to time and look at it again and say, do you remember that? Do you remember the ways in which God blessed us through each of you? Hear this. Verse 2 of Philippians 1 from the Living Bible, it says this: May God bless you all. Yes, I pray that God our Father will give each of you his fullest blessings and his peace in your hearts and lives. Those words begin the message from the Apostle Paul to the church he founded in the city of Philippi, and I want to use them to help me express Liz and my personal thoughts at this time of transition in our life and ministry. There's so much I want to say, but I'm a Baptist preacher, so I've organized my thoughts into a 3-point sermonette. You can take the preacher out of the pulpit, you can't take the pulpit out of the preacher. So my 3 points are 3 words: gratitude, amplitude, certitude. Ready? Here we go. Gratitude. Some of you may not know this, but when Liz and I and our 3 sons came to Valley, I had no intention of ever becoming the senior pastor, and certainly not of preaching on a regular basis. I came, as has been shown to you, as pastor of discipleship or Christian education. But an elder of this church by the name of Larry Meacham, if you've been around long enough, you know he was the, I don't know the exact title, but he oversaw all prisons in the state of Connecticut, and he was a solid Christian and member of our church. And Larry and his wife Evelyn had Liz and I over for dinner, and Larry said to me, have you ever considered that God may have given you a gift of preaching? I said, no, absolutely not. He said, well, I think he has. Would you be willing to pray about that with me? What do you say to an elder? Yes, sir. So it was literally a lay leader of this church that God used to call me into a 26-year preaching ministry, and still counting. And it was people of this church, including many of you here today, who took the crazy step, high-risk step of incredible generosity after the death of our beloved senior pastor, Paul Avon, of turning over this pulpit to a rookie preacher who had a lot to learn. You had more faith in me than I did. But I should not have been surprised by that level of faith, because it was known, not just in Connecticut, it was known all the way to Minnesota, of the spiritual DNA of this church, which was to die for. From the first families, the Kurtz and the Mentzers, to the strong leaders of today, it's been the people of God who have exercised their faith, used their gifts to provide the muscle which God then used to build Valley into this lighthouse of spiritual hope that is bordering the cultural seas of 21st century New England. I and my family have been greatly blessed and highly favored. If you're a gospel music fan, you know where that came from. Gatlin Brothers. Greatly blessed, highly favored by your generosity to enlist and endorse us as part of your leadership team for over 30 years. Speaking of family, I'm grateful beyond words to my wife Liz and our boys, Nate, Jesse, and Adam. You see, they sacrificed the most and gained the least from my being a senior pastor. Maybe it wasn't the best way to do senior pastoring, but in my normal week of ministry, I was out of the house 3 days a week before breakfast and 4 nights a week I was back at church immediately after dinner. Yet they loved me and supported me through all of that in ways that made it possible for me to be a shepherd for you. Without their love and support, I would not have been much good to any of you. And with regards to Liz, well, let's be honest. It's clear to me the real reason you called me as your senior pastor was so you could be loved on by Liz. And it's worked out pretty well, hasn't it? So we Abramsons are exceedingly grateful for having had this privilege of serving God by serving you. It was not a chore. It was a great privilege. So the second tude here of my 3 points, first gratitude, then amplitude. This means to amplify, to enlarge. To what am I referring? The size of this church, how it grew, the size of the budget, how it grew, the number of missionaries we supported, the number of people who came to Christ over my time of being on staff here. Well, those are all good things, but we need to remember what our current senior pastor, Rob, taught us just last week. Do you remember last week's sermon? Pastor Rob reminded us, 1 Corinthians 3, verses 6 and 7, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants or he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Now, the amplifying, the enlarging I'm thinking of happened to me and to my family. Liz and I and our boys have spiritually been enlarged. You've heard testimony from my sons. We've matured because you called us into this leadership role. For example, there are not many churches, if any, that would embrace 2 different styles of worship. At one point, we had 3 or 4 different styles of worship going on in a weekend. But you did. You did. There are not many churches, if any, who would allow the director of Summer Bible Club, which would have been me back in the day, way back in the day, but there are not many churches that would have allowed me to take the entire group of elementary kids on a boat ride on the Connecticut River for one entire day, because our theme was Noah. We can't study Noah anywhere except on a boat. Not many churches would do that, but you did. That attitude amplified, it enlarged my soul. And then there were the unplanned experiences that enlarged me and my family. For example, I remember one Thanksgiving service we were having. This is so long ago. It was in our worship room, was what is now the multi-purpose room. And it was an evening service before Thanksgiving, as we continue to have done in the past years. A group of about 6 adults got up to sing a special musical number. And while they're getting ready and starting to sing, another gentleman from the audience just gets up and goes up and stands next to them. None of us knew who he was. He doesn't have music. And he's just kind of standing with them and beginning to sing. And the women's on this side of the group that are trying to sing are looking at him and like, what is he doing? Who is he? Don Bishop, our youth pastor at the time, he and I were up on the platform. And Don leans over to me and he says, okay, I got the guy. He says, when this song is over, you take over the rest of the service, I'll take him out. Your faith has to grow from experiences like that. So he just went down from the podium and he had a few words. I don't know what he said, but he couldn't get him out of the room. The guy sat down in the front row, and Don just sat down next to him. At the end of the service, this gentleman just made his way out, and one of the ushers came up to me and said, "Look what someone put in the offering plate." It was a billfold, the entire wallet. We opened it up and we go, "That's the guy." We ran out to the parking lot and tracked him down. The end of the story is he was off his medications. But God was working through all of that, even in his life. Or I remember during a church business meeting, I looked down as I was giving a report, and I saw that I had on one brown shoe and one black shoe. And I'm like, I'm not going to make any big move about this. Maybe nobody will notice. After the meeting, Don Hacker came up to me. Don said, "I'll bet you have another pair of shoes exactly like that at home." Or during a worship service in this room, I'm getting ready to, getting in, asking God to work in my life, and our all-star head usher, Jim Silk, comes up and taps me on the shoulder. He said, "Pastor, I just want you to know there's a woman here with her dog in her pocketbook." I didn't know what to say. He said, "Don't worry, I got it covered." These and many more such enlarging events are things God has used, showing us he does have a sense of humor as well. But more seriously, having been here so long meant that Liz and I and our sons have had real life issues that we've walked through. Your issues and you walking through with our issues. Some were great celebrations, others were difficult struggles, even tragedies. But the way this church celebrated those victories, and more importantly, the way you closed ranks around us during times of crisis, that is what enlarged our souls. We will never forget how you cared for us. And for that, we will be friends forever. Lastly, all this has produced certitude, gratitude, amplitude, certitude. Certitude is simply the assurance that something is true. And for us as Christians, it means that some things are true forever. In these words from Paul in the first chapter of his letter to the Philippians, he fashions a message that couldn't express more perfectly what Liz and I feel toward all of you. In verse 6 of Philippians 1, we see the phrase in the Living Bible. In verse 6, the phrase is, "And I am sure." And I am sure. My Greek professor at Wheaton College wrote a commentary on the book of Philippians. He says that phrase of 4 English words is actually just one Greek word, and it means simply being confident, being tremendously confident. I am positive, we might say. Paul, the apostle, and Liz and I are certain of something. Paul is certain of this for his friends at Philippi. Liz and I are certain of this reality concerning all of you. What is it we're certain of? Listen. All our prayers for you are full of praise to God. When we pray for you, our hearts are full of joy because of all your wonderful help in making known the good news about Christ from the time you first heard it until now. And we are sure that God, who began this good work in you, will keep right on helping you grow in his grace until his task within you is finally finished on the day when Jesus Christ returns. How natural it is that we should feel as we do about you. For you have a very special place in our hearts. We have shared together the blessings of God. Only God knows how deep is our love and longing for you. With the tenderness of Jesus Christ, our prayer for you is that you will overflow more and more with love for others, and at the same time keep on growing in spiritual knowledge and insight. May you always be doing those good, kind things for others that show that you are children of God, for this will bring much praise and glory to our Father. Liz and I are confident that you will do that. Of this, we are certain. Amen.